Lisa Cortes, co-director of All In, The Fight for Democracy. This is an incredibly timely film about voter suppression. First of all, after working on this, what was your reaction to this election and the record turnout of voters in Georgia turning blue?
Well, I'm happy to say that I'm finally breathing again, Joyce. We went into the election season with so much trepidation as Americans based on the discord and the falsities that were being kind of cast about. That I think Georgia's history and what happened there is not just a singular moment that we were able to look at, but it also speaks to this greater American history and struggle with progress for democracy, and the recognition of marginalized voices. And so there's this wonderful intersection with our film, its examination of history, and Stacey Abrams and her journey, that I am so grateful we've been able to share in numerous platforms because of the lens on all of those moving pieces of our complicated history.
Well, you co-directed this with Liz Garbus. So how did you guys go about conceiving the structure of the film? Because it's like you said, like, it's part history lesson with a lot of historical context, and there's some verite moments and some personal stories, and like you said, you follow like Stacey Abrams' gubernatorial race. So how did you put all those elements together?
So much of the structure came from conversations that Liz and I had with Stacey Abrams. And then when we started to talk to some other folks in the film, this concept of how the past is prologue to this present moment that we find ourselves in, and that in order to understand what happened with Stacey Abrams in Georgia in 2018, one had to understand the deeper history. A lot of time was spent looking at the architecture of voter suppression and the analogies between historical moments that we would think are over, but like the monster that voter suppression is, it resurfaces. For example, post-Reconstruction, we have these Florida vagrancy laws that and basically are putting, Black men, incarcerating them, they're losing the right to vote. So then the natural kind of contemporary story for us to look at was that of Desmond Meade and the Florida Rights Coalition and their work with returning citizens to be able to vote again. You might see them as two separate moments, but they really are, there's a very strong connective tissue between the past and the present.
Yeah, and Ari Berman says in the film, the greatest moments of progress are followed by the most intense moments of retrenchment. That's like sort of like your thesis of the film, because it's like you should, people might think like because all these amendments were passed like decades, centuries ago, like the fight is over, but there's always people in power who want to retain that power by disenfranchising people.
Well, Joyce, we think we know our American history. We all have, learned about the Constitution and the preamble, which talks about we, the people, and this concept of this bright, shiny city on the hill that we all supposedly have entrance to. And, in keeping with what Ari said, history is not a flat line, and there is this push pull that happens from the beginning when there's only 6% of Americans, white land-owning men who can vote, to the very slow progress that happens with the 15th Amendment and then Reconstruction, but then the pushback with violence and intimidation and poll taxes, and then the progress of, the Voting Rights Act, but then the Voting Rights Act gets gutted in 2013. And, so this is a part of the dance we're in, but more importantly, it's a part of the monster movie that our history is entangled in. Every time we have thought we cut the head off the monster, the Hydra, sprouts not one, but two more heads. And so that is the dance with enfranchisement and access that has really been going on, since the inception of our country.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I love the presentation of some of the historical context because you guys used animation, when Stacey's talking about when she went to the governor's mansion, when she was valedictorian for high school and she was turned away, and then when she was talking about her grandmother who was too scared to vote when she could finally vote. So how did you guys come up with that motif of doing illustrations instead of maybe like reenactments or something when retelling those stories?
Liz and I discussed what would be the most effective storytelling device, particularly for some key moments in Stacey's history, but also the story of Maceo Snipes. These are moments where there is little to no archival, and as opposed to just having the people we interviewed tell the story, we wanted to use animation as a way of not only telling the story, but giving you a sense of the interiority of the characters, the psychological moments. I love when Stacey goes to the governor's mansion and she says she can't get in, and she's been the valedictorian of her high school. She's looked forward to this. And our animation has her shrinking and disappearing down a hole. Like, what better way to give you a sense and to transport the viewer empathetically to what it was like to go through that experience. And in the case of Maceo Snipes, we thought he was an incredible hero who a lot of people never heard of. And there's just one picture of him that exists. And we wanted to use his individual story as illustrative of so many people who, because they dared to vote, they lost their lives. And so animation took the place of, and it filled the spaces that we couldn't have done with archival because it didn't exist, and that we could obviously elevate the storytelling by the use of the images that Diana Ijaita, our illustrator, created and hand drew every single frame that we see.
Yeah, it's a really great way of drawing people in, because I think you're in documentaries, you're so used to seeing like live action or archival footage, like you said, but that didn't exist. So, well, like so many doc subjects, this story is not over. And, we still have the Georgia runoffs in January. So do you have any plans of maybe doing a sequel to this or continuing covering this somehow? Or do you want to like maybe take a breather and see like down the line, like what happens next with our democracy?
Well, as you said, this story is evergreen. This history is fixed, and hopefully, slow progress and the bending of the moral arc is going to be towards correcting this lack of access for many people. There's definitely elements with the film and stories that through social and other means that we are looking to lift in terms of the story and the history and how we can move forward based on the progress that has been made.
Awesome. All right, Lisa. Well, that's all I have. Thank you so much for your time today. And we'll see you back here in a little bit.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you.